Hello and welcome to another episode of BB's Finds. I am Blake B. Been a little while. Here I am. This is the only show on YouTube where a guy extemporaneously talks about his collections while sitting in a closet shared with his wife. Wife's clothes behind me. Not going to talk about wife's clothes today because I don't collect them. She does. Today we're going to talk about an author, philosopher, probably the world's foremost mythologist in terms of comparative mythology. One of my heroes, I look up to him as a human being as well, is Joseph Campbell. As I do on episodes of BB's Finds, I talk a little bit about the history of things that I show, my history with the things that I show, as well as the things that I have. So it's Joseph Campbell books today. Nothing's exceedingly rare. You can find Joseph Campbell books anywhere. The two best-selling books of his are Hero with a Thousand Faces. Oftentimes it's a college textbook, sometimes even high school, depending on how advanced the high school is. It's a pretty lengthy and thick and dense in terms of its content. I often refer back to it when I have to, or when I'm questioning something in terms of story and narrative and other works. We'll get into that. The second is The Power of Myth, which is pretty much omnipresent. Power of Myth was a conversation or a series of conversations between Campbell and Bill Moyers. It was released as a 6-part docu-series on PBS in the 1980s. You could also buy the CD version. I've got that in the Laserdisc version. I showed my Laserdisc that I have of it as well. I did have the cassettes. VHS tapes are around as well if you're looking for something on a budget and you still have a VHS player. It's good stuff. I mean, I pick up something new every time I listen to it. And I tend to listen to the CD version probably anywhere between 2 and 3 times a year. It makes, just for driving, like background stuff and just picking, it almost feels like a podcast in a way. So comparative mythology is one of my, I would say it's one of my interests. Later in life, if I have time and money and energy, I do want to go back to school to be a comparative mythologist, or at least get a degree in it. Why I like comparative mythology, mainly because of storytelling and narrative structure. Growing up watching a lot of movies and television, a lot of the structure, the framework or the skeleton of storytelling has to do with mythology. And it's all around us. It's the way we explain life. It's the way we explain why we're here, the purpose of life. It's also, a lot of the stories are, especially in religion, which is kind of interesting to study as well. A lot of the stories are very parallel in, Old Testament, New Testament, even in the Quran, or the Upanishads, or the Buddhist texts and things like that. A lot of the stories are very same or similar in terms of the way the systems of morals and ethics are in place for the religious doctrines and things like that. Now, how I discovered Campbell, for many years I thought Campbell was actually. It's kind of funny because I thought Campbell was actually George Lucas's teacher, like an actual physical, like George Lucas went to a Campbell class, sat down, and now I realize when Lucas was referring to him as a teacher, he wasn't referring to him as a teacher in a classroom setting. He was referring to him as a teacher in essentially life. Much in the way of, we have our schools. We learn from our friends and parents and things like that. Informal teachers is what he was referring to. But for many years, I thought Campbell, I picked up on this probably when I was like 13, 14, 15, when I heard in passing that he was very influenced by Joseph Campbell in his works. I just, yeah, for some reason I thought he took some classes at USC. It doesn't make any sense now looking back. He was a film major at USC. Of course, of course he's not going to take mythology classes. Campbell taught at Sarah Lawrence College for many years. His history is no, it's pretty run of the mill. You know, he is American here in the States and everything. He passed away in the 1980s, mid to late 80s, I believe. I'm not sure of the year. Speak extemporaneous here. I don't look up YouTube or anything like that, or Wikipedia or anything like that. I kind of talk off the cuff, just what I know, or what I think I know. So yeah, he grew up. He grew up in a Catholic family. So that was sort of his first taste of mythology, was the Bible. And then he also was very interested in the American West, in particular cowboys and Indians, and learning about their cultures. And from there he kind of just built on the base of their mythologies, and that's how he became very interested in comparing and contrasting world mythologies. One thing about Campbell, though, is beside being a mythologist it's really hard to put into words, but he's more of a like, to me, he's just someone who really, like, almost is teaching us to get the best out of life, or best out of being. He often refers to this concept of following your bliss, in the importance of being in a happy space or being in a happy spot. You know, he said, you know, I think, like, in Power of Myth, for example, there's a quote where he says, like, put on, you know, to find some time in your day to put on a music or read a passage from a book that you really like, or, you know, or listen to a song you really like, or, you know, do something you enjoy doing. That's following your bliss is what you enjoy doing. You know, we could think about that almost in terms of how we are kind of have become this, like, commercialized society, and working and things like that. Like, following your bliss is doing something you like doing, or doing something you love doing. It could be either. But, you know, it's basically how we want to spend our time here. And you know, Campbell, there's no answers to mythology. There's no answers to religion. Obviously, we can't prove the afterlife or anything like that. But I think he does provide some just really, really, really interesting insights into how we think about, or how, you know, how people think about religion, and, you know, moreover, storytelling, I think. I am a little more interested in the storytelling and narrative aspects of Campbell than the religious aspects of Campbell. He does talk about God a lot, and gods. In certain cultures, there's, you know, more than one. So wanted to go through some of the books that I have. Some of the books I have. I'm about 10 minutes in right now, just talking. Yeah, let's get into it. So I got, first up, we got Myths of Light, Eastern Metaphors of the Eternal. I haven't read all these books, by the way, but I just, you know, I have them on the shelf, and these are eventual reads. Campbell is it's very dense. I feel like going back and having to read passages over and over again, you know, of the stuff I did read, it's very referential. Almost feels like a book you kind of read once and then kind of take a note, and then if you have an idea about something, you go back and reference that thing that you have an idea about. You know, here he talks a lot. This is a lot about Eastern mythology, about Indra, and you know, the Buddhist stuff and the Upanishads, and a lot of the very classic Eastern mythology. Campbell's, like, I would say he's probably second to none in that area. You know, he talks a lot about archetypes as well, or, you know, archetypes more of a Jungian concept, Carl Jung, but he talks a lot more about, like, the parallel. You can almost apply his template of narrative and storytelling to various stories throughout time. I, for one, am very interested in King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. It's sort of a recent interest, believe it or not, within the last couple of years. It's fascinating to hear the different takes on it. The little nuances, like, there's classic texts, obviously, but then there's the retellings of the stories, and then, like, the historical accounts of, what could have been with the actual King Arthur without, like, the magical elements, of course. But I'm very fascinated by that stuff for some reason. There's actually a pretty good show on right now called The Last Kingdom on television. It's on Netflix streaming. But it's not about King Arthur, but it's about that. It takes place during that time, and I just find that almost like that, like the 900s, 1000s in England, to be a very interesting time, because things were changing. That's how society was forming. Like Western type society was forming around then. This is like after the Roman stuff, and they were starting to come together. So yeah, as much as I do like learning about the Eastern philosophy and the metaphors and mythology, things like that, I think right now I'm probably a little bit more interested in the Western stuff. Next up, we got Masks of God. This is a series that he did. This has to do with there's a lot of Dark Ages stuff in here, so this is probably more in line with kind of what I'm a little bit more interested in these days. But he talks about primitive mythology. There is some stuff about Eastern mythology in here, and Occidental mythology, which is like the dream time with the Aborigines and things like that. We have Myths to Live By. This is just a sort of almost like a handbook of basic myths which we can apply to our own lives and better. It's almost like a self-help book in a way. The subtitle is How We Recreate Ancient Legends in Our Daily Lives to Release Human Potential. I think there is something to be said about that, about applying these mythological almost like rules to the way we live and the way we think. A lot of people probably don't think about that. I spend a lot of time thinking about that, at least in my subconscious more than my conscious mind. Here we have, speaking of subconscious, myth, dreams, and religion. More back to like the Jungian and the almost like psychological perspective of mythology, and what how dreams kind of shape our dreams. Things we see in our dreams shape our reality and shape our vision, philosophies and things like that. There's a lot. It's very dense. I mean, it's I almost consider it like more of a technical book. We'll talk about the two more popular ones in depth. So we got Inner Reaches of Outer Space, and this has to do with basically same kind of theme. Being and all the mythological aspects of being, and how ancient myth is tied into what's inside. Almost like the story of human is all omnipresent, and we all go through the same things. But this has to do with like metaphors. How we use metaphors as almost like religion, if we're not religious people. There's people of varying degrees of religion. How religious you are is obviously a spectrum in what you believe in, your belief systems and things like that. This has to do more with what's inside, how you feel, rather than the forces outside coming in. This is more of it's more of a personalized thing. Next up, we got a hardcover version. No dust jacket on this one, but it's a Thou Art That, and this is another book about religious metaphor. So this one's Pathway to Bliss, Mythology and Personal Transformation. Again, it's almost like a self-help book, using mythology and using storytelling and trying to distill meaning and morals and ethics from stories over time to try to make ourselves better. Which is I definitely for that. I think there's something to be said of someone who takes time to think about that and think about the old world and kind of the way things used to be and slowing down a bit. I mean the way we live today is kind of, I mean it's a fast paced time, but and here we have Campbell. This is another conversation book. Here he talks with Michael Toms. This is called An Open Life. It's I haven't read this one at all. It looks pretty interesting. I mean, I kind of like his conversational pieces because they're a little more informal and not as dense in terms of the writing to try to get through. The Power of Myth is very layman's. I'd say this is I'm flipping through, I'm seeing Upanishads, the typical Campbell, man. He definitely liked to read the Upanishads. I'll one day have to check that out as well, now that it's on my shelf. So let's talk a little bit about the monomyth and storytelling before I get into Hero with a Thousand Faces. So the monomyth is it's essentially a formula that Campbell derived, whereby there's various steps of a journey. In storytelling, if a hero takes a journey, there's various steps that are taken that are similar in every story where a hero does take a journey. For example, Star Wars, which is the most basic Campbell, it's the one everyone uses. The journey of Luke Skywalker starts off as a farm boy on the planet Tatooine. Basically, call to adventure. The droids come down to the planet. Now, I'm kind of going over the main. There's like 17 or so plot points in monomyth, but okay, droids come down to the planet. There's a call to adventure. Refusal of the call means Luke says, "Oh, what am I doing? I'm a farm boy. I can't go anywhere." And then I think the few other bigger plot points are atonement with the father, which it's definitely like a Darth Vader thing going on, and meeting with the goddess. Those are the two big ones that people reference a lot in storytelling. Dan Harmon, who's a television writer, is a big Campbell head, and Dan Harmon devised his own kind of Campbell-esque. I wouldn't call it monomyth, but it's a story. He calls it story circles. It's a pretty like almost like mathematical way to write, and I think it's pretty genius if you watch Community or even like a television show like Rick and Morty, which he does as well. It's pretty clear that everything follows this formula. You can check it out. You can look it up. Okay, so we talked a little bit about monomyth. Campbell wrote this book, Hero with a Thousand Faces. So this is the one. This is the biggie that's taught in schools. This is the one that college. If you probably 50% chance, flip a coin. You've read this before, at least have read some of the pages before in a college course. If you studied anything about comparative mythology, religion, maybe even like social type studies or civics, it has to do a lot with. It is what it is, the hero journey, right? But it also has to do a lot with the archetypes, like the Jungian type archetypes, and just narrative structure and mythology and storytelling overall. So let me. There's a couple passages in here, pages I kind of wanted to bring up. Well, I'll just talk about the different. Yeah, okay. I'll just talk about the different parts of the monomyth, the path of the monomyth. So chapter 1's the departure. Now this is what I was talking about in Star Wars. So call to adventure, refusal of the call, supernatural aid, which is essentially when Obi-Wan Kenobi comes and rescues Luke from the Sand People. Crossing of the first threshold, Mos Eisley Cantina. That's when Luke, there's the point of no return. Belly of the Whale. Belly of the Whale has to do more with subconscious things like that. So it's almost like the Force training in the with the blast shield down in the Millennium Falcon on the way to the planet Alderaan. Or Alderaan. I said that like I'm from Chicago or something. So that's kind of the departure, the initiations, the road to the trials, the meeting with the goddess. Road to the trials, this is all the stuff that's taking place on the Death Star. Woman is temptress, atonement with the Father, apotheosis, ultimate boon, refusal of the return, the magical flight, rescue from without, crossing of the return threshold, master of the two worlds, and freedom to live. So those are the in totality the 6, and 5. So it's 17. I was right. 17 plot points in Monomyth or in Hero Journey. You can, one way or the other, you can say it. I mean, this applies to, if you think about it, I mean, it's like everything, right? It's like universal. Harry Potter, you can apply this to. Probably Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, you can apply this to. Well, maybe not so much Raiders, because Indy was sort of a badass. He never really refused a call. Maybe he did. Marcus Brody was trying to get him to go on an adventure to find the Grail. Oh, I don't. I leave that up to the people, the Grail hunters. What else? The Matrix, perfect example. Matrix, red pill, blue pill, refusal of the call. What else? Or not refusal of the call. That's the point of no return, threshold. Trying to think what else we got. There's just tons of stuff. I mean, Back to the Future probably even has some of this stuff in it too. So Hero with 1,000 Faces, probably about a third of this book actually gets into Monomyth. There's a lot of just kind of set up to that point where Campbell's ready to talk about those 17 steps. He's mainly talking about storytelling, and he brings up examples of like ancient Greek mythology and stuff in Eastern mythology, the Bible, anything where there's a journey involved and where there's a hero involved. Campbell is he can be found. That's Hero with 1,000 Faces. If you haven't read it, I suggest picking up a copy. You may not understand it. I still don't half the time understand. I have to read sentences 3-4 times to kind of get what he means. But it's not like super cryptic or dense. But he just knows a lot of stuff, and he knows a lot of stories and things like that. So I kind of have to. Sometimes I just have to separate myself from trying to be like, oh, I need to learn everything about this to having, again, this be more like of a reference book. And it's almost the way I treat all Campbell books. Is almost like straight reference, like where there's really no like trying to understand a book in totality. Like it's not gonna, I guarantee you it's not gonna happen for you if it it may. If it does, you should probably be a mythologist. So let's talk about Power of Myth. Okay, so Power of Myth, again, this is the book that Campbell was essentially, it was a series of conversations between him and Bill Moyers in the 1980s. At that time, Bill Moyers, he's a pretty dang good interviewer. Now that I think about it, he doesn't really try to pry too much out of Campbell, but I think he does ask a lot of the right questions, and trying to get it, specific examples and questions. He basically just I would say Moyers like talks like a little bit, and then Campbell kind of just goes on tangents. But in a good way. In a good way. What I like about this is it's broken down into the six or so segments. The book hits 8, but we got Myth in the Modern World, The Journey Inward, The First Storyteller, Sacrifice and Bliss, The Hero's Adventure, Gift of the Goddess, Tales of Love and Marriage, and Masks of Eternity. So there's different types of myths that are told around the world and throughout time. This sort of breaks them down into those 6 or 7 different categories. So it's a nice little compartmentalization. Again, it's a reference book to me. If I want to look up something, he talks about the Green Knight from like Sacrifice and Bliss. He talks about the Green Knight from Knights of the Round Table. Just talk about Star Wars a bit in the Hero's Adventure. Obviously I'm a big Star Wars nut, so it's like that's kind of what brought me here. I think this is the first Campbell book I bought. Probably just, I think I picked this up for like $1 at like a book fair or something in their very early 2000s or late 90s, when I just, hey, I heard of Joseph Campbell. He was George Lucas's teacher. But it's a good read. I kind of do recommend listening to it rather than reading it, just because you can actually hear Campbell and you can hear the passion for the subject matter he discusses. That type of passion doesn't really translate like that well on paper, but to some extent you can tell. I mean, Moyers talks a little bit, Campbell talks a lot. You could tell Moyers will ask a question, then Campbell will respond, then he'll give an example, of the some mythology. Sometimes he gets it's like 5 or 6 pages of a story that he'll tell in order to explain whatever concept that Moyers is asking him about. It's a good read. I do think it's a lot easier to read than Hero with a Thousand Faces, because it's more of an informal setting, an interview type setting, rather than almost like an academic type book. But again, I do treat all Campbell books as reference books. That's why they have the index in the back, handy dandy index. Dragons. You want to learn about dragons? You want to learn about the devil? Or the origins of the devil, or magic, or machines, or law versus ethos. It's all here. Kali. Anything, any topic, any mythological topic, you can pretty much find in a Campbell book. What's interesting is, I feel like in personal opinion, I feel like the world, like today, like mythology, I don't really know that it almost seems like mythology is like the old way, right? Because like today we basically just rely on technology and instantaneous absorption of information and data, rather than kind of slow playing it and trying to explore things more. Again, these books, like anything, these books do not have answers. The answer is within. That's what's awesome about it, is with Campbell, the answer is within. It's however you see things, and your opinion could always change too. It's how we view the world. That's what mythology says to me, is how do we view the world, and on a greater scheme, like how do we, a lot of our, at least my generation, their world is viewed through music, movies, and books and things like that. And without having a guy like Campbell to kind of prod me in that direction of learning about mythology, the mythological implications of those narratives, and what storytelling really means. And I could definitely, I'm like the type of guy who can go sit at a movie, and if it's a good story, the movie can be the most bland looking thing in the world, but if it's a good story, I will stay there for the whole thing. If it's one of these movies where it's just pure computer animated thing where it's just eye candy and the story's not good, like, forget it, man. You've lost me. You lost an audience. So I think Campbell is kind of for everyone. But some aspects of him might not be, like the religious stuff. People may not be as interested in religion or learning about religion as others, but that's fine. There's you can kind of, it's like part and parcel. The Campbell, like, even if you take Campbell as like the follow your bliss, even if you take that as like almost like a mantra, follow your bliss, I think the world would be better, right? Like, follow your bliss. What's not to love about that? Not to sound too much like a hippie, but maybe I am one. Follow your bliss, man. That's like the best. That's the best. So anyway, that's my Campbell book collection. I highly recommend checking out Power of Myth, Hero with 1,000 Faces. The rest of the stuff, maybe a little bit more specific in terms of the sort of the overall theme of what he's trying to convey in the mythology. But personal, there's some self-help inner journey stuff in here, and there's some stuff about religion if you're interested in that. I do like religion. I'm not a religious person, I would say, but I do like learning about it. I do like the Bible's definitely one of the books I want to read, both Old Testament and New Testament. I've not read those, but I think just having an appreciation and love for storytelling and narrative, it seems like something that I should read at least once in my lifetime. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope everyone's well, and I'll get back at you with another video, hopefully something that's more interesting to you guys. I mean, Campbell's interesting to me, but I feel like this isn't, I'm not showing Scorsese signed books like I did in the second video or whatever, but this is, for me, this is good stuff. Anyway, again, I hope everyone's well, and take care. Talk to you next time.